What is up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Manuscript Podcast. This is the podcast where we believe 21st century man controls his destiny, that his choices define his future, and that he writes the script to his own freaking life. I'm your host and fellow man, Ruben Stamper, and as always, it is an honor, a pleasure, dare I say a privilege, to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for joining. If you get something out of this podcast, consider subscribing. It kind of mean the world to me. Appreciate it. All right. I'm excited. We're going to get right into things. Today, we are talking all about the importance of hobbies for men and why you'll be rather uninteresting if you don't have any. Let's get to it. I have a question for you. Do you often talk to people and in your head think, I really am not that interesting of a man? Well, if that's you, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is the problem is staring you right in the mirror. The good news is problem is staring you right in the mirror. You can change yourself. So you are the problem if you are constantly thinking to yourself, I'm not an interesting person. Maybe it's a self-esteem issue, but more likely, you're right. You're not a very interesting person. But you can change that in an instant. Just take a couple hobbies on, and you'll be an interesting person. So first off, what is a hobby? A hobby is an activity you do that you enjoy doing that is outside of work and outside of your regular everyday life, okay? It's that thing that you just look forward to doing, whether it's with your guy buddies or by yourself, that just, it gets you excited, but also when you're done with it, it leaves you with this rested, peaceful feeling. Now, for me, two of my favorite hobbies are hunting and fishing, and one of the reasons is I think there's like a peace that nature can bring you that few other things can, you know? I love going out there and just hearing the woods wake up and, reeling in a fish and just watching the water and just really being saturated by nature. For me, when I leave that experience, I feel rested, I feel reset, and I know that I'm bringing my best self back to the people who I love. And that's an important thing for every man, I think. I think if you have people in your life who you care about, it's actually vital that you have things you enjoy doing that you go and do that are outside of work and outside of your just regular family life that help you reset, help you think about the things that really matter. And it gives you just a second to really clear your mind and be present in the moment. Instead of, being at work and worrying about this thing or that thing, or being around the house and worrying about the grass having to get cut and the bills having to get paid. You're out there doing your own thing. And I don't know what it is. Every person is different. They all have, each of us should have different hobbies. But my challenge is if you are a man who doesn't have hobbies, or your hobbies are like, you think they're hobbies, but they're not, then change. So what do I mean by the second part of that statement? That they, you think that it's a hobby, but it's not. A hobby is not watching TV. That is not something that will make you interesting. Why? Because everyone does it. See, your hobby is supposed to be something unique to you that could tell other people about the type of person you are. Right? So, or at least the things that you're interested in. So, everybody likes a good movie. You can't go out there and say, let's watch Dune 2, so, that's why I'm an interesting person. No, a ton of people have done that. That doesn't make you unique or interesting. It makes you maybe more relatable, and maybe that's a good thing, and that's a plus you see. But that's not a hobby, right? Doing the things everybody, so I love playing video games every now and then, That's not a hobby that I would say makes me an interesting person. Why? Because millions and millions and millions of people do that. Now, I like tapping maple trees. That's something that is rather unique. Not a huge group of people do that. I love hunting and fishing. That's a big group of people, but it's definitely a unique hobby that I think tells people about the kind of person I am. I was raised in the country. I love the country. And so it can give people insights into the type of person you are, but also it makes you a much more interesting person. So before I dive too deep into all this, I want to just run through this list of reasons I think that as a man, it is actually vital that you go out there and have a couple hobbies that you really care about. So first off, like I said earlier, they give you a chance to relax. But it's weird because hobbies, like they invigorate you, they recharge you, but they also help you relax, right? So like, I'm trying to think. Some people like collecting coins, and that's the thing that gets them excited. And they like trying to find coins from like ancient Rome that are for sale, whatever it is. Some people, I used to tie flies for fly fishing, and I found that very therapeutic. You've got this little vise, and you got this tiny little hook that you're making for, fly fishing and you tie the string around, and you'd learn specific ways to master your craft. And that was its own challenge and enjoyment within itself. But I'd always leave that experience thinking, oh man, I'm really rested and relaxed. And that was just a fun thing I did that felt meaningful, and I really got something out of it. But more than anything, it helped me just relax and come back to everyday society rested and ready to go and ready to try and be more virtuous. And so that is one reason that I think that you should try and have a hobby or two that is unique to you. And I'm not saying that you can't share it with other people, and that's great. That's fine. That helps you have even more conversation with those people. But a hobby is not something that everyone does, right? That's just regular stuff everybody does, right? Brushing your teeth isn't a hobby. At least, it shouldn't be. If you just joined that club, I'm sorry for you and for your dentist. Okay. All right. The second reason, moving on, the second reason that I think is important is, it kind of helps you keep your sanity. There are times of life, there's seasons where things get really crazy and you feel like, when it rains, it pours. Everything bad is happening at the same time. And just being able to carve out a little bit of time to do a hobby that you enjoy, whether it's hiking or whatever it is, just a little bit of time to do that will just, reap rewards big time. Because like I said, it's important to actually be able to reset yourself, mentally, physically, however, so that you can come back and actually be the best man you can. So the third reason that I think every man should have a hobby or two that he really enjoys and is passionate about is because it makes you a more interesting person. It just flat out does. You're at a party, right? And you specialize in building remote control vehicles, right? You just love building remote control vehicles, and that's a thing you're basically an expert at because you just love spending your time doing it. And so every chance you get, you'll go out and you'll do that. That makes you interesting. Like, if you're with a good conversationalist, they're going to want to know more. I'd want to know more. Like, how does that even work? What do you work on? How do you act? What are the components? How do you get the components that actually control the car from the remote to the car? Like, there's a lot of stuff that's interesting that would make you into a more interesting person. And hell, even if someone isn't interested in talking about that, that doesn't change the fact that you yourself are a more interesting person. You've got a bigger resume of things that you do that are kind of unique and quirky and make you. Okay? So hobbies are great for that. So if you ever find yourself struggling, at parties or whatever, saying, I'm just not a very interesting person, find some things you are passionate about that you love doing, become really good at them, and just embrace the fact that you're going to have some things other people don't do. That's what makes you interesting, right? The person who does the same thing that everyone else does is not interesting. They're ordinary. You don't want to be ordinary. I don't think any man should try and be ordinary. Be extraordinary. Extraordinary, okay? So, that's what an interesting person is. It's someone who doesn't necessarily follow the mold or who kind of stands out from the group. That makes you interesting and unique and more fun to talk to and just a more interesting character to be around. And then the last point I wanted to make with it is that when you have hobbies that help you reset, help you relax, but that you are passionate about, it helps you fill time with meaningful things. It's so easy to just like sit down and turn on the TV or scroll through your phone all the time. But if you have these hobbies you set up, things that get you like fired up to go do them. I get fired up. I get to hunt and fish less than I used to when I was a high schooler and stuff, just because I have more responsibility. That's totally cool, but it makes the experience sweeter for me. So when I do go, I get so excited. I mean, I can hardly sleep the night before. I get so excited. I mean, I can't wait to get out there in the woods, or I can't wait to go fishing. And so, but it makes you fill your time slots that are free with things that really actually matter to you and that get you fired up. But also, at the end of the day, once you're done doing that activity, it leaves you feeling really rested, and it just brings the best version of yourself back to your loved ones. So, anyways, that's all I have to say on the importance of hobbies for men. I think it's a crucial thing that every man should try and implement into his life. It's just to have a couple hobbies that you enjoy doing, and maybe you share it with your guy buddies, maybe you don't. Maybe it's your own solo thing. Maybe you like learning about the history of Journey's guitars, and where they got them from. I don't know. That's a weird thing, but might be what you're into, and that would make you into an interesting person. So anyways, I digress. I will get off this topic, but that is the first section of the Manuscript podcast where we were talking all about why men need hobbies. Let's move on to section 2. Let's go. All right, everyone. So in section 2 of this episode of the Manuscript podcast, we're going to be talking about an article that I don't think will surprise anyone, but that may have solved the reason why so many people are cranky and upset today. So, according to an article by Sarah Fioroni, which is an awesome name, by the way, Sarah Fioroni and Dan Foy of Gallup News, Americans are getting less sleep and are more stressed than they have been in a long time. For the first time in Gallup polling since 2001, a majority of U.S. adults, 57%, say they would feel better if they got more sleep, while 42% say they get as much sleep as they need. This is nearly a reversal of the figures last measured in 2013, when 56% of Americans got the sleep they needed and 43% did not. These differences in average sleep reflect substantial changes over time in the percentage of U.S. adults sleeping 8 or more hours versus 5 hours per night. In 1942, this blows me away. I think this is crazy. In 1942, 59% were getting 8+ hours of sleep per night, while only 3% reported getting 5 hours or less. By 1990, the percentage reported 8 or more hours had fallen to 27%, so from 59 to 27%, while the proportion getting 5 or less was up to 14%. Today, a quarter are still getting 8+ hours, but the percentage getting 5 or less has risen to 20%. So 20% of your average American Joe is out there not getting enough sleep. And then on stress. Over the past 30 years, the number of Americans who are stressed has been on a steady incline after a sharp drop in 2003. I don't know what caused that. I'd be interested to know. The most recent data show that nearly half of all Americans, 49%, report frequently experiencing stress, up 16 points over the past 2 decades, and the highest in Gallup's trend to date. All right, now for the commentary on this article. I thought this was really interesting. Maybe it's why people are cranky. First off, we gotta step back and take a 10,000-foot view. They've got to be correlated, right? Like the lack of sleep and the amount of stress are they've got to be directly correlated. They didn't say that in this article, but my guess is you don't get enough sleep, it's easier to get stressed out, especially by small things. Sleep is incredibly important for just the overall health of your bodily system. But I thought that was crazy. So in 1942, 59% of Americans were getting 8+ hours of sleep. Now, I think a big reason that's happened, my guess would be, is because of the amount of technology we have in our lives now, where we stay up later because we are scrolling on our phones or watching TV, and our average bedtime has got to be, for most people, like, I'm going to imagine it's 10:30 is probably average, maybe 10 o'clock is average for when people get to bed. And, like, I think personally we're kind of supposed to go to bed roughly around when the sun goes down and wake up roughly when the sun comes up. Now, obviously, work and things change how that goes for a lot of people. But, yeah, I think that was really interesting that now we are getting way less sleep than we actually need as human beings. And then it's like, why is everybody so aggressive and upset? And why is road rage taking a giant spike? It's because no one's sleeping. I don't know. And then on stress. So, like I said, I think that those two things are directly correlated, where you've got people not sleeping enough, and thus they are getting stressed. But I also think, and this is a critique I have on this study, but also on the idea of stress in general, we have very much broadened the horizon of what qualifies as stress in our society. And, we say everything is stressful. Some things are just regular life and they're uncomfortable, but it's not the same as like, oh, I've got this chronic stress. And I think that's bad for a lot of people, right? Because the less things you have under the category of stress, like the more rare that people will be saying they're stressed, right? And I think there's this thing where it's like, oh, taxes are gonna stress you out like crazy, and it's gonna just wreck your world. It's like, it's when people are saying that, it's so much easier to think that, right? But if you're just like, this is just a shitty thing I have to do each year, and I gotta get through it, and I hate it. Sure, I hate it, but is it stressful? Does it have to be stressful? Everyone else is saying it's stressful, so I guess it must be stressful. Damn, I guess I'm stressed out. This is terrible. No, that's because we've broadened the horizon of what stress is. It's like going to your everyday job and you have to deal with some conflict. Like, that's not fun, and maybe that is actually slightly stress-inducing. But the point I'm trying to make here is that not everything should be considered stressful, because that's what our culture likes to do recently. It's just like, oh, everyone's suffering from this chronic stress. It's because we say everything is chronically stressful. Like, there is a correlation there. So, and maybe I'm sure technology has had a role in upping our stress levels too. Because you constantly think either the world's going to end or you've got a terrible life because so-and-so has an amazing life. Learn some contentment, and you'll be a lot better on that front. But anyways, that was the article I wanted to share with you all today. I thought that was pretty interesting. And, so we're getting less sleep and more stressed than we used to be. I mean, I guess it's not that surprising. But anyways, that's all I have to say on Section 2. Hope you enjoyed. We're moving on to a Section 3 of the Manuscript Podcast, Ruben Rants. But it's actually, I've had a couple of these recently. It's a positive rant, guys. I'm excited. Like, this is going to be a good one. So stay tuned. All right, everyone. It is so incredibly rare that I have a Ruben Rant segment that is positive. And it's even more rare that I go to the movie theaters and I'm blown away by a movie. Most of the time, I'm a hardcore cynic, and I think I'm pretty justified in that, because I don't know if you've seen the movies recently, but they've mainly been shite. Just absolutely shitty movies that I would never watch again. I would never recommend to anyone. I leave and I'm like, gosh, that was just terrible. It really was. So like I said, it's incredibly rare that I leave the movie theater and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to recommend that movie to some people because it was thoroughly enjoyable. And that is what I'm doing today. I'm going to recommend a movie called The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Now, the main stars in this are Henry Cavill and I think Alan Richardson is his name. So basically, the plot of the movie is there's a supply boat, right? So this big freight boat that is going to deliver a lot of supplies to German to the Germans to create U-boats, right? And the U-boats were the underwater submarines that were sinking tons of supply ships coming from like America over to Britain, which was like at that point in the war one of the last strongholds of the Allies that was like available. It was like kind of before Americans had really jumped into the war, and so there's a lot on the line. If they didn't actually sink this boat, if they didn't cause this thing to go away, then they were never going to get enough supplies to Great Britain to like feed their people and things like that. And so there's a lot on the line, like I said. So it's very suspenseful. Like, I was very much like on the edge of my seat, and there are like some very uncomfortable moments where it's like, oh man, this is like, I don't know what's going to happen. But the action was great. The character development was really good. If I had to be a total jackass about as a critic, which I'm not a movie critic. I don't know jack shit about movies. Don't take my word for anything, I suppose, when it comes to that. But if I had to be a crazy critic, I would say that they kind of tried to cram too much information into the dialogue at times. But it still went really well and was thoroughly enjoyable. The action sequences were insane. It was very bloody. I will warn you, very bloody. But just really great action sequences. And there's a lot of subplots going on, but they do a really good job of tying them all together. You don't ever feel like one's like really out of place. They tie them together really well. And I'll even take back to what I said. There were some areas of dialogue that are really, really good and very interesting and unique to the movie and just entertaining. And so it gives you, at the end of the movie, kind of a synopsis of the people, and you see some pictures of them. And it's really cool because it's based off a true story. Now, obviously, there's a lot of creative liberties and a lot of action sequences. You're like, that never happened. But it's still they had to make the movie entertaining, and it really was. They just pulled off a great job there, and I haven't seen this thing getting a ton of like publicity, I guess. So I recommend it. It's kind of under the radar movie, but was thoroughly enjoyable. I'm glad I saw it in theaters. Drank myself a massive icy while I was doing that. That was great. Free refills if you get a large, which was a bad idea. Temperance, like I said, guys, I'm not perfect at these things. I should have not drank as much icy as I did, but it was enjoyable anyways. So highly recommend The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. It's a great movie. I think you should go see it. It's a fun guy movie too, specifically. Like if you want to take your guy buddies and just go watch a movie together, go for it. Really fun to see in theaters. So yeah, check it out. That is my Ruben Rant segment. Like I said, Ruben Rants, it's not always about things that I hate. Sometimes it's about things that I really like. And I really like this movie. So anyways, that's all I have to say on The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Go check it out. Hope you enjoy it. And yeah, that ends this Ruben Rant segment of the podcast. All right, everyone, that about does it for this episode of the Manuscript Podcast. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. If you got something out of this episode and you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. And have yourself a great day. As always, remember, there's a better life out there. Let's get after it. Peace.